once stating that his cinema was all about utilizing imagination to create adult fairy tales. Sergio Leone's bold and fictionalized tales of the West transcended genre norms and continental boundaries. In his lauded career, Leone only directed 7 films, 6 of which are considered to be true Leone works. In this 6-film run from 1964 to 1984, 5 of these films were attempts at depicting the West through the eyes of a true visual artist. Leone is often credited with starting the European Western craze with his monumental Dollars trilogy. This trilogy was crucial in not only redefining the pop culture identity of the cinematic Western, but was also fundamental in forming Leone's signature directorial style. Even in the very opening scene of Fistful of Dollars, one can already see that Leone was interested in far more than just imitating American Western conventions. Instead, he remains intent on turning the Western into a vessel for the operatic, utilizing close-ups, long shots, and composition to create mysticism in regards to the Western archetypes and identity. With his first Yojimbo-inspired venture into the genre, all the way through to his penultimate attempt at crafting the definitive Western, Leone's foreign perspective of the American identity helped to reimagine the genre entirely, channeling a perspective that was both gritty, melancholic, and dreamlike. When Sergio Leone's Fistful of Dollars arrived on American shores in the late 1960s, the Western genre had seemingly run its course. One could see that the industry's stateside was shifting, particularly the Western, which was moving from its ideological and myth-driven foundations into a rougher, violent, and more unforgiving approach. Laying the foundation for this new era in the Western genre was Fistful of Dollars, which emerged at a time when the entire genre seemed dead and buried. The first in a series of films known as either the Dollars trilogy or the Man with No Name trilogy. In this first installment, we follow Clint Eastwood's infamous unnamed protagonist as he rides into a new town, known for the deadly rivalry between its 2 leading factions, the Baxters and the Rojos. Although initially in danger, the man soon chooses to play the 2 sides against each other for his own advantage. Although Fistful of Dollars wasn't Leone's first directorial venture, it became the first film to demonstrate and showcase his now iconic sense of style and visual direction. Leone's rhythmic approach to his storytelling was something that stemmed from his desire to present his stories in an operatic fashion, despite some of his later films presenting superior evidence to this approach. Within Fistful of Dollars, we can already observe Leone starting to juxtapose his extreme close-ups with precise framing and elongated long shots. Not only was Fistful of Dollars responsible for establishing the foundations of Leone himself, it also catapulted its central star Clint Eastwood to substantial heights, who prior to portraying the role of the Man with No Name, had a largely minor career in Hollywood, with his most notable credits stemming from the television show Rawhide. Eastwood is rather instrumental in the film's clear cinematic vigor. Here he encapsulates the required grizzled persona impeccably, with his visible scowl perfectly fitting of the filth-stricken presentation Leone sought to convey in his westerns. Although the film is not as memorable and visually striking as the films Leone would go on to make later in his career, it still acts as a solid introduction to the iconic Eastwood anti-hero, the Man with No Name, and Leone's distinct autorial signature. Now harnessing a $600,000 budget, and with Eastwood displaying a stronger sense of humour, Leone sought to expand the scope of his groundbreaking Western trilogy with For a Few Dollars More. With Eastwood once again in the leading role, and Ennio Morricone helming the score, Leone's film was clearly a natural progression from his work in A Fistful of Dollars. The film adds screenwriter Luciano Vincenzoni, alongside fellow spaghetti western icons Lee Van Cleef and Gian-Marie Volonté, who join Eastwood in this formidable cast and thrilling tale, which tells the story of two contrasting generations of bounty hunters on the hunt for the most wanted criminal in the West. As previously discussed, Leone was a filmmaker who thrived on rhythm and tempo. In For a Few Dollars More, Leone's approach reaches new heights, as he would continue to present his close-ups in a fashion akin to that of a painting, one where the characters seem to be removed from their settings, forever lingering in the moment they are being captured by the lens. This rhythm was something evidenced by Leone's interplay of music, sound and image, as well as the design of El Paso and the use of the Spanish villages. His expansive visual style was one that succeeded in contrasting dirty realism in close-ups with exaggerated spectacle, all of which helped to make A Few Dollars More a more assured and confident work than A Fistful of Dollars. The film was also clearly another hit with audiences, who were now once again going to see westerns, thanks primarily to Leone's revitalization of the genre 1 year prior. As a result, A Few Dollars More became the most commercially successful Italian film ever, beating Fellini's La Dolce Vita by a factor of 50%. Operatic, artful, and hard-hitting in every sense of the word, For a Few Dollars More deserves to rightfully stand on its own beyond the confines of the Dollar Trilogy, for this was another masterfully composed and revisionist western from Leone, who would only continue to further his craft from this point onwards. In perhaps the most significant of all the spaghetti westerns, Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly remains one of the director's definitive opuses. Set during the American Civil War, two unlikely men form a mutual alliance whilst looking for buried gold. With an outlaw also wanting the gold hot on their trail, the two men mustn't plunder their chances at riches. The film once again stars Leone muse Clint Eastwood, whose character this time around leans more into a conman territory, while still maintaining the wit and charm we'd come to expect from the man with no name. Crafted with an operatic level of scale and spectacle, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was responsible for fortifying Leone's stronghold on the Western genre at that moment in time. A genre drenched in cinematic folklore and history, Leone sought to deconstruct the genre, and he achieved this with immense success. With its intriguing mix of both myth and realism, the cinematic world created in Leone's vision of the West is one of tangibility and sensory power, inspired by an old Roman song about a cardinal who did bad things well and good things badly. Leone's cynical and comic Western epic succeeds in juxtaposing many true-to-life historical events with his central treasure-hunting tale. Whether it be through Ennio Morricone's iconic pulsating score or Carlo Simi's gritty and dirty production design, the craftsmanship on display here is one of the contributing factors that help to elevate Leone's vision to the next level. Here Leone balances his compelling story with intricate performances, enabling him to craft a film that contains both scope and subtlety. This is a true unique vision of the American West, and it is a film that will never age because of it. After 1966's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Sergio Leone set out to craft an even greater Western, or as he called it, the ultimate Western. In Once Upon a Time in the West, Leone is at the forefront of one of cinema's greatest mix of talents. Reuniting with composer Ennio Morricone, Leone united Western legend Henry Fonda, cult figure Charles Bronson and Italian megastar Claudia Cardinale to help craft arguably his most important work. When preparing for Once Upon a Time in the West, Leone decided to remove himself from his usual writing team and began to study an array of Hollywood westerns, alongside his compatriots Bernardo Bertolucci and Dario Argento. This desire to incorporate the American Western ideals into his film is visible in many of the film's sequences, namely the opening scene and closing scenes, which echo of Fred Zinnemann's High Noon and John Ford's Iron Horse, respectively. Filmed for Paramount between April and July of 1968, and with a budget of $3 million, although Leone would shoot Once Upon a Time in the West in his familiar locations of La Calahorra and El Paso, he would also film in the iconic western location of Monument Valley for the first time, something that wasn't only an homage to the works of John Ford, but something that represented Leone's desire to remain true to the genre he so adored. Here Leone's power of silence and masterful execution of suspense helped the film's pace to never halt. As a huge admirer of Western cinema himself, Once Upon a Time in the West seems fitting of its reputation as Leone's true masterwork. Not only did Leone revive the Western genre earlier in the decade, he also provided it with its final chapter and symphonic curtain call.
Let's go.
Sergio Leone's final western, Sucker, also known as A Fistful of Dynamite, or Once Upon a Time, The Revolution, remains his most mysterious work, a western war film that is both melancholic and political in nature. Starring Rod Steiger and James Coburn as the film's central duo, Leone's film is set at the beginning of the Mexican Revolution in 1913, and centers on the unlikely friendship that is formed between a bandit and an explosives expert, who rebel against the government and subsequently become heroes of the Mexican Revolution. Seeking to demonstrate why revolution isn't always a lasting solution to conflict, Sucker was Leone seeking to create a work that is a political allegory in nature, and it is easy to see why it is often regarded as one of Leone's most personal and historically charged westerns. The film itself was Leone's attempt at portraying his own disillusionment with politics, something stemming from the fact that Leone had seemingly fallen out of love with the things associated with the West. Despite not functioning quite as well as some of his other more simplified westerns, Leone can be seen exploiting and utilizing many of his own tropes and idiosyncrasies within Sucker, which allows it to act as a fitting companion piece to the rest of his iconic oeuvre. A filmmaker whose legacy has extended far beyond the grave, the films of Sergio Leone have become synonymous with pop culture and cinematic folklore. With his dreamlike and impressionist portrayal of nostalgia guiding the ship, much can be taken from Leone's stylistic and thematic portrayal of the West. So much so that his stylistic influence can be seen everywhere, from 90s American cinema to today. This desire from filmmakers to create Leone-like imagery are proof that his long-standing legacy remains foundational in the area of contemporary consideration of Leone's works. With his elongated compositions, dramatic flourishes, and impressionist imagery all becoming interlaced and internalized as part of the Western genre's iconography, it is clear to see that with his westerns, Leone not only redefined what one considers a western to be, he shifted the definitions of what cinematic style was for an entire generation of filmmakers and cinephiles alike.